4 million people are using this method to get more things done. And today we have David Allen, the author of the book, Getting Things Done, to tell us all about how you too can implement his blueprint for you to implement everything you've been wanting to do for years in a lot more efficient and more productive way. So I'm very excited to be here with David Allen. So David, please tell us, what's your number one secret for getting more things done?
Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu. Mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services.
Stop using your head as your office. Your head's a crappy office. And most people are still trying to manage a very complex variety of things in their life and their work, trying to use their head to remember, remind, prioritize, manage relationships between all that stuff. And it doesn't work.
Okay, so what's the alternative to that? What do entrepreneurs?
Empty your head. Get everything out of your head. You know what you're after is clarity. You don't need to work any harder. Come on. There's an old personal growth axiom that you can never get enough of what you don't really need. And a lot of people are trying to work harder to get rid of the stress. You don't need that. You don't need to work harder. You need to stop. You need to reflect. You need to have more space in your head to focus on the meaningful stuff and to prioritize. But you can't do that just in your head. It just wasn't designed to do that. Your brain evolved to do very sophisticated stuff, which is using long-term history and pattern recognition just to survive. Oh, that's a TV, that's a computer, that's a person, whatever. Because you're doing that right now. The problem is you go to the store for lemons, you come back with 6 things and no lemons. What happened? Oh, you just tried to use your head to remember, remind, prioritize stuff, and it just doesn't work that well. So a lot of what I discovered over all these years was you need to get your head empty. Doesn't mean you need to finish everything. It just means you need to appropriately engage with all of your commitments, little, big, indifferent. It doesn't matter. Most people have made a lot more commitments than they realize. Would, could, should, need to, ought to, got to handle, that light bulb needs changing. Oh my God, I need to hire a vice president. Should I give my daughter karate lessons? Yada, yada, yada. And it goes on, yada, 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 all over the place. And it'll wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning about stuff you can't do anything about at 3 o'clock in the morning. Your brain doesn't actually have one. Your mind is a great servant, but it's a terrible master. And the problem is a lot of people are trying to use their head to remember, remind, prioritize, and manage relationships. And it just doesn't work very well. So I just discovered, hey, you need to figure out how to get your head empty. It doesn't mean you finish stuff. It means you need to appropriately engage with whatever your commitments are so that you've captured them, you've clarified them, you've organized reminders where they need to be in the right place so you see them at the right time and context. It's like putting stuff in front of your door so you don't forget it in the morning. And it's that idea, it's that simple, if you will. But most people have big habits about keeping stuff in their head and not trying to externalize and objectify their commitments.
Thank you. Tell us about how did you come up with this method and why did you find it was so effective?
I did it for myself, basically. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I was in graduate school in history and in Berkeley in 1968 and dropped out to sort of discover myself, God, truth, and the universe and all that. So I studied, meditation and spiritual practices, got a black belt in the martial arts and karate. So a lot of that was just the self-exploration, but nobody was paying me to do that. So I had to pay the rent. So I became a pretty good number 2 guy. I had some friends who had their own businesses, so I helped them with their businesses. And then I discovered they actually pay people to do that. They'll call them consultants. It's like, oh, wow. So I did that. And then my life started to get more complex and busier. And so because of my meditation and karate and martial arts practices, I discovered the practical value of having a clear head. If you're jumped by 4 people in a dark alley, you don't want 2,000 unprocessed emails somehow hanging around your psyche. You need to be clear, and so clarity is really critical, just in terms of being productive and being present. The mindfulness people these days, focus on your breathing. And it's all about just being present. So being present was a cool thing. And I discovered the value of that early on. I mean, this is, I was in my 30s and my 40s, before I even started to do this. I even didn't even recognize that consultant was a career that I could have till I said, well, maybe, I wonder, I'd help people with their businesses, and then I get bored because I'd fix whatever they were doing, and then I go help somebody else. And, wow, they actually pay people to do that. So I said, okay, so let me just start with my own consulting firm, or my own little consulting practice. We didn't call it coaching back then, but that's a lot of what it was. It was like one-on-one. I just sat down with, people who were running their small businesses, and, help them think through what they were doing and how they were doing it. And so I needed these techniques for myself. So I didn't wake up one morning with suddenly this whole methodology, in place. It was a long string of, as I say, epiphanettes. A little epiphany here, a little epiphany there. Oh, that worked. Oh, that worked. Oh, that worked. And so I started to accumulate these practices for myself that allowed me to stay focused and clearer, and, more in control of my life and my work. And then I started to share these techniques with my consulting clients, and if they implemented them, it produced the same results for them. Like, wow, these things seem to be universal in terms of how they work. So it was not one big thing that I suddenly came up with. I guess the big thing was somebody saw what I was doing, and they said, gee, David, we need that result in our whole corporate culture. Can you design a training around what you've come up with? And I went, gee, I don't know. Let me see. So I designed a pilot program. We did a pilot program for 1,000 executives and managers with a seminar I designed, and it was highly successful. This was Lockheed, 1983, 84. And I suddenly found myself thrust into the corporate training world. Could have fooled me. If you'd have told me as a history major in graduate school in Berkeley in 68 that I was going to be in the corporate training world, I'd said, come on, what are you smoking? Who are you kidding? Are you really? But that was the ripest audience for what I'd come up with, and they were willing to pay me for it. And so I wound up being thrust into the corporate training world. And so from 1983, 84 on, I then trained, hundreds of thousands of people, and mostly in the U.S. corporations and U.S. companies, all referral based. I didn't do any marketing. I just picked up the phone. People said, gee, my husband or my wife just went through your training in their company, and we need that in our company. Can you come in and do that? So I just wound up then spending a lot of my time. And then my consulting turned more into really one-on-one coaching with mid to senior level people in these companies that wanted me to sit desk side with them one-on-one and help them implement the methodology. And so I literally have spent, I think, Gladwell talked about 10,000 hours. I spent many more than 10,000 hours literally one-on-one with some of the best and busiest and brightest people on the planet you'd ever meet, actually implementing this methodology and refining it, fine-tuning it, and it became pretty solid and bulletproof. But it took me 15 years or 20 years to figure out what I figured out, and that nobody else seemed to have done it the way I did. And it was bulletproof because I never had any formal or traditional education or training in business psychology or time management. Maybe that's why my stuff turned out to be unique, because I didn't have any precondition about what it should be or what it should look like. And so I just wound up doing that. And then people said, gee, David, you should write the book. I said, write the book? What? Yeah, I guess maybe I should write the manual in case I got run over by a bus. At least somebody could then pick it up and figure out what I'd figured out in my 20 years of my career by that point. So it took me that long to sort of realize that maybe it was worth writing a book about what I had uncovered in those 20 years. And so it took 4 years to write the book, from 1997 to 2001, when the first edition of Getting Things Done was published. And that thrust me into a whole new world, because the book turned out, I had no idea how popular it was going to be, but it turned out to be a bestseller and spread around the world. So
thank you. So tell us about your 5-step blueprint for getting things done.
Well, first of all, you have to capture the stuff that has your attention. In other words, you got to get stuff out of your head, off your mind, onto some sort of piece of paper or something. You need to capture the stuff that has your attention, because things that have your attention are because you're not yet appropriately engaged with them. That is, there are decisions about it you haven't made yet, or you haven't parked the results in some sort of a trusted external brain that you trust you are the right person will see at the right time to be reminded about stuff you ought to do. So the first step is to capture. Second step is to clarify what you've captured. You don't just, you could just make a list, but most people's to-do lists are incomplete lists of still unclear stuff. What are you going to do about mom? What are you going to do about the bank? What are you going to do about karate? What are you going to do? All these things that might be on your list, but you haven't clarified exactly what you want to do about those things. What's the outcome you're committed to accomplish, and what's the action step you need to take to move the needle on it? So that's the clarify step. So first you capture stuff has your attention. Then you need to clarify, step 2, what it means, whether you're going to do something about it or not. And if so, what does doing look like? Where does it happen? And then step 3, if you can't finish the thing the moment you think of it, you need to then park some sort of reminder in some sort of a trusted organization system. List usually. Here's the errands you need to run. Here are the things you need to talk to your boss about. Here are the things that you need to do at your computer. Here's the websites you need to surf. Here's the errands you need to run, So making lists essentially of the reminders of the actions that you need to take about your commitments. That's step 3, is to organize. Step 4 is then make sure you look at the list. You're going out for errands, make sure you look at your errands list. So you don't go, oh God, I should have stopped that. Or I should have picked, So you need to make sure you reflect on the contents of what you've parked in your external brain, as reminders. And then step 5, so that's step 4, is to reflect. You need to then step back and take a look at your calendar, look at your action list, look at the projects that you need to be managing and dealing with. And then step 5 is you engage. How do I now focus my activity and my attention? So if you've done steps 1 through 4, you've captured, clarified, organized, and reflected on the contents of your commitments. Then you're making trusted choices about what you do, as opposed to just being driven by latest and loudest, which is what most people are using as their prioritized.
Thank you. In cases where you're working in a company and some of your tasks depend on other people completing their task. So and sometimes it can be a chain. So let's say, I don't know, Pedro needs to do task 1, Sandra needs to do task 2, another person task 3, and then you can review it. And then it kind of goes back to them kind of revising perhaps certain steps that they haven't done completely.
Yeah.
What would you do there if you were to have those kind of tasks alongside an overwhelm of, thousands of other tasks that need to be done as well?
Well, a critical list is waiting for. What are you waiting on to come back from some other source so that you can then keep moving in terms of what you're doing? So waiting for a list is critical. So what are you waiting on somebody to finish or to get back to you about or to handle? And, then you need to review that regularly to see if you need to light a fire, kick butt, check status, on that with anybody else, relative to getting stuff done. So yeah, critical stuff to keep track of. Things you've ordered that haven't come yet, things that other people told you they're going to do, you're waiting on them to finish or handle. You need to keep track of all that for sure. And very few people actually really do that. And they follow up when it blows up, as opposed to just on a regular, consistent basis checking in. What's the status of this? How are we doing? Do you need any help? Do we need to change our priorities? What's up? And those are the good, conscious, mature conversations that need to be had. But you can't do that if you're not keeping track of all that.
Okay. Now, in terms of when you have like a really large number of not just tasks, but a lot of creative activities that kind of like pop in your head all day long. And let's say you're very good at writing them down, but not actually getting them actually done. So there you have a really great list with, the waiting for, X, Y, and Z from Pedro. And then you have a great list for like shopping, and you have a great list for, for all the different things that you need to do, classified by type. And what if you're not actually doing them? What do you feel is going wrong there? And what should entrepreneurs do to actually get them completed?
Well, most people haven't actually determined what the very next action is required to move these things forward. And so if you haven't determined what the next action is, then there's kind of an unknown space between you and it. And so you'll tend to avoid it because you hate to be out of control. So you don't want to jump into something you don't know how to do. And you don't want to jump into something unless it's perfect already. And so perfectionism is one of the biggest sources of procrastination. It needs to be perfect before I move on it. Well, you're not going to first of all, nothing's ever perfect. It can be excellent at it, but there is no perfection. You just need to make sure you move in that direction. But the problem is people just stop moving because they're afraid. They have anxiety about hopping into something that they don't know they can do well right off. But it's like, if you're trying to write something, pardon my French, but it's like write a shitty first draft. That's how you get started, is you do something, you engage. If you remember the old Top Gun movie, where Maverick is hesitating up in the sky and his boss is going, Maverick, engage, engage, engage. You need to pull the trigger, get going, because you're not going to find out how to do it well until you start doing. And so whatever you need to do to sort of unhook the doing part of it is how you unstick those things. But oftentimes, if you haven't figured out the next action, you're just going to avoid it like the plague.
So how do you figure out what your next action should really be?
Well, you have to use a muscle. It's called think. It's like if you had nothing else to do but that, where would you go and what would you do? What physical, visible activity would you engage in? Is it a website you need to surf? Is it a conversation you need to have with your partner? What do you need to do? You need to go to the store and buy something? But what's there? And the next action is never really that hard to do. It's just usually a very simple thing. And if you can do that action in 2 minutes or less, once you decide what it is, you should just do it right then. It'd take you longer to organize it and look at it again than it would be to finish it right there. And the 2-minute rule is magic. I've had a lot of executives tell me it's worth every dollar they ever paid me just for the 2-minute rule. So that there's all kinds of stuff sitting around in their email and their desk or whatever that would take them less than 2 minutes to actually do something about and move it forward. But they're the bottleneck.
Thank you. So in my business, for example, I find that I'm overwhelmed with so many activities because, for example, my entire team is depending on approvals from me. And if I'm always available, then it's easy for them because let's say they finish something, they ask me about it, and then I can check it, and then it kind of gets done really fast for the client. But that has an impact on me, for example, because then I can't do my own tasks. So what would you have me do differently to kind of optimize my own tasks? Would you have me do some sort of time blocking? Would you recommend time blocking for people?
Only if you have to. I wouldn't because you'll give up your own commitments with yourself sooner than anything else. And then you feel bad you didn't keep your own commitment about it. So I plan as little as I can get by with. So time blocking is, yes, if you have something that's due by Friday afternoon and you've got a wall full of meetings between now and Friday afternoon, may be a good idea to just hold that. Hey, let me just block out 2 hours because I'm going to need that to finish this thing I need to do by Friday. But that's only if you've got a really hard deadline. You might need to do that, and it very much depends on your life and your work and what you've committed to do. You may be understaffed, Lily. You also may not have handed off something to one of your staff people that they need to have so that they step up to the plate and be able to then manage that as opposed to having it leak up to you all the time. I don't know. They're very, very unique to your situation.
Thank you. So for entrepreneurs that are getting interrupted all the time, and because it's
by the way, there are no interruptions. There are only mismanaged inputs.
Okay.
Right? There are no interruptions. If you're allowing someone to come in and interrupt you, why? Is that part of your job? It might be. If so, that's not an interruption. That's a part of your job. Deal with that. And yet, if you don't need to be interrupted, they could have sent you an email. They could have given you a note about it. They could have done something else. Then they could be trained so that they don't have to then walk and get a face-to-face. A lot of people need face-to-face because they don't have their own systems. They don't trust themselves. They don't trust their own system. So they're going to go dump their out of controlness on you. Wrong answer. So you need to train them or give them my book or do something, so that they don't do that. They don't interrupt that. So, a very important list is agendas. What are all the things that occur to me that I need to talk to Lily about? And you keep that on a list so that then when they get a face-to-face with you, they handle the 6 things as opposed to coming with every time they have one thing they need to talk to you about, they come interrupt you. and interrupt themselves because they don't have a good system. So there's all kinds of reasons that you might be interrupted, but you're the one who allows it.
Yeah, so based on your description, you can say that it's part of my job, actually, because, for example, let's say they do a thumbnail for this podcast, right? And then I have to check that it's correct. And a lot of times it isn't. Okay, so it's like a critical part of the job that I have to check it.
Right.
And sometimes they make really big mistakes, like putting someone else's job title on the thumbnail. And, that could really stop them from actually doing the work.
Sure.
So let's say in a case like this, where you have entrepreneurs that, let's say, have their own tasks, but at the same time, they're getting interrupted because it's part of their job to be interrupted all day long, because they have to, give approvals for different things that the team needs to do. So let's say, in my case, I have a small team, but let's say there are entrepreneurs that have much larger teams than me. What would you have them do to make sure that they're still focusing on their own tasks? Would you have the team kind of like create like a checklist of things that the manager would need to check, and then so that the manager could actually check everything in one go? But that would tremendously slow down the team.
I don't know. Beats me. Depends on the situation. Some teams need to meet daily just to calibrate based upon the changes that are happening so fast and so many things going on. Some teams only need to get together once a week or maybe once a month to say, how are we doing and what's up? So a whole lot of that may have to do with, one of the biggest mistakes or one of the biggest improvement opportunities for most teams is role clarity. Whose role is this? Is this my job to do this? Is there somebody else that can handle this? And so thinking about roles and who's got the role, and do you need to train somebody up to take that role? Or do you need to hire somebody who can take that role? Or if it's yours, it's yours. Then you have to then make that your priority and make all the other stuff you've got on your plate, those are secondary. After this, I don't know. You would have to make that the entrepreneur has to make that judgment call. And that depends on whether that's two people in their little startup company or whether they got 200 already. So if they have 200 already, they better have somebody that they could trust that could handle that, that they can then train up to make sure that they do that. And then you've got to take the training role. You have to hold their hand and make sure that they're doing it right. So none of this is free. Yeah, you're gonna have to make maybe some hard choices, about how you spend your time and energy. But that won't stop till you're dead.
Thank you. How do you decide actually what's most important and urgent to do based on, let's say you have some long-term goals, and based on that, maybe you need to study, or you need to take some time to do certain things to kind of make it happen over a longer period of time. And then you have some short-term goals, and then you have some short-term things that have to be done right now. How do you kind of manage that entire process of what's urgent, what's important, what's not urgent but still important, and that kind of thing? How do you manage that to make sure that you actually get as many things done as possible?
Well, you need to get the picture of the whole thing. If you're not seeing the whole thing, you're going to be driven by latest and loudest, some different piece of it. You need to see the whole thing. So how often do you need to stop and reflect on bigger game, shorter game, short-term things, whatever, and where you are in that game? Again, you don't need to work any harder. You need to think. And thinking is hard. Wait till you try to write a book. You'll know how tough thinking is, right? It's a muscle you have to train to stop yourself and back off. But the problem is most people can't see all of it. I guarantee you, for the thousands of hours I spent one-on-one with some of the brightest people on the planet you'd ever meet, by the time I spend 2 days with them and they look at their project list, and most people have between 30 and 100 projects, that is, things they need to finish that are going to take more than one step to finish them. Once they take a look at that, every one of those people changes their priorities for the next 2 weeks. I didn't tell them what their priorities should be. They recognized it once they saw the picture, once they saw the whole thing. But if you can't see the whole thing, some part of you says, well, there's a part that I'm still missing. I haven't looked at all of that. I haven't looked at my long-term goals. I haven't thought about that. I haven't thought about that. So yeah, you're going to need to get some sort of a version of a picture of all these different levels of commitment. your life purpose, your vision of success, the goals and objectives you need to finish in order to accomplish those, the roles that need to be fulfilled to make sure that the engine is healthy to get you from here to there. And the projects you need to finish about all those open loops and the next actions you need to take, those 6 levels of commitments. I couldn't get those any simpler. I just identified what they were. And so you have them, whether you're conscious of them or not. And so how often you need to see which level is up to you. What do you need to do to get that off your mind? Sorry, you're on mute.
What's the best way to prioritize what you need to do next?
Well, ask yourself, which thing would make the biggest difference to me if it were finished right now? What thing would take the most pressure off me right now if it were done, if it were completed, or if I made appropriate progress on it? That's all. Not a big mystery. You just need to ask yourself that question.
And how do you set out what you're going to do next? Is it the same question over and over?
Always. You're always having to make a decision. What do I do? Do I take a nap? Do I have a beer? Do I work on this hard thing? You know, I know some people that what they decide is what's the most fun thing for me to do right now. And some people say, what's the hardest thing for me to do right now? And I do both. Sometimes I say, it's time to do a fun thing because I need to get my energy up and I need to get rolling on something. And sometimes I go, I need to handle this hard thing because it'll get it off my plate and allow me to snack on email the rest of the day, you know, or whatever, you know. So I plan as little as I can get by with. People who meet me, they go, God, David, you're nothing like what I thought you'd be. They thought I was going to be buttoned down, you know, anal retentive, tight ass, corporate kind of guy. And I'm not that. I'm very much follow my spontaneous, intuitive hunches about what I need to do next. Because that's how I came up with getting things done, because it allowed me to do that and still maintain a healthy life.
Thank you. So how do you decide which question to ask yourself? Is it because you've just mentioned what's the most fun thing I could do right now? What's the hardest thing I could do right now? What's the best thing that would make the biggest impact for me right now? How do you decide which question you should be asking?
Beats me. I have no idea. That's just a personal choice. How you decide you want to play the game.
Okay. What are the biggest breakthroughs people around the world have had when implementing getting things done?
Oh, myriads of things. Some people allows them to get to be a lot more creative. I have a lot of people in the creative professions that are big champions of my stuff, because what it does is it allows them to sort of be free to paint better, to be more creative, to be, I don't know, you know, do better music. A lot of people use it to be more strategic. Wow. I suddenly am able to, on a more consistent basis, to see a longer horizon, make better choices about who to hire, about what we need to do next, about whether we should merge with this other company or not, and be able to be more strategic. A lot of people just do it to be more present. I coached the head of the World Bank years ago, and his presenting issue to me was, he said, David, when I go home on the weekend to my young kids, I don't want to take the World Bank with me. He just wanted to be more present with his kids. Yeah. So that's a lot of what people get out of implementing this methodology, is just the ability to be more present and more available for what it is they want to do. Because you don't need time, you need room. You need space. You don't need any more. There is no more time. You just need room in your head. I mean, Lily, if you had nothing on your mind right now, when we finish this podcast, and zero, there's nothing pulling or pushing on you at all, a clear blank slate in terms of your head, how would you use it? You'd have to answer that. I'd be more strategic. I'd be more creative. I'd be more innovative. I'd be more present. I'd be more loving. I don't know. But you need the space. If you don't have the space, it's not an option.
Thank you. What part of the getting things done system has led to the biggest breakthroughs?
All of it. Some people just writing things down that they never wrote down before is huge. Some people making next action decisions when things show up as opposed to when they blow up is huge. Some people just creating an organization system, an external brain that they trust, so they don't have to keep rethinking something to remind them about what to do when, is a huge breakthrough. A lot of people, one of the biggest breakthroughs is building reflection time to stop and think. And that's probably for most entrepreneurs and executives, that's the biggest need, is reflection time. I need time to stop, back the world off, and let me just think, or let me just think about nothing, and then see what shows up.
Thank you. How do you recommend entrepreneurs get around to doing the hard things, the sales calls, the things that they dislike?
No, they have to decide why they want to do it to begin with. What's the purpose of it? Why are they doing that? And a lot of that comes back to, well, what are they trying to accomplish in their life? And what are they trying to accomplish with their company? What are they trying to accomplish with the new product that they're trying to develop, whatever? And so it all comes back to, thinking about, okay, well, based upon that, I guess I better make the sales call, or based upon that, I guess I better do this other thing. And so, look, we all have to do all kinds of stuff that we don't particularly like. Wash dishes, clean the toilet. I mean, do all kinds of things that we don't necessarily, unless you get into the zen of it and go, okay, wow, washing dishes, this is kind of fun. Wow, we even have dishes to wash. What an elegant life we live, So there's all kinds of there are all kinds of ways you can reframe your perspective, so that these things you consider hard are not that hard.
Thank you. But how do you empower yourself to do the hard things when you really don't feel like doing them?
Don't do them until it hurts. No, just stop doing it. Only do what you feel like doing until you don't feel like doing that anymore, because you need better than handle these other things. So just, have the guts to just do what you feel like doing until you feel. See, if you really had the courage to only do what you feel like doing, what you feel like doing will change. Trust me.
Okay, but that means, for example, let's say if I don't feel like doing sales calls, then at some point I'm going to be completely broke. And then what am I going to eat?
That's right. And so you're going to feel like doing something so you're not broke and you can eat again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an interesting perspective. What would you say are the biggest challenges for people to implement getting stuff done system, the getting things done system?
Getting used to having nothing on your mind. That's the toughest. See, the reason most people resist doing all this is their addiction to ambient anxiety. You're willing to not do what you need to do, so you're not waked up at 3:00 in the morning about something you can't do anything about. So once you get used to having nothing on your mind, you'll do whatever you need to do. I still look. I just turned 79. I still have to do everything that I'm talking about in order to keep my head clear. I still have to handle stuff that occurs to me. I got to write it down. I have to figure out what to do with the stuff that has my attention. I don't get away from this. I still have to do that. But the reason I do that is because I don't like anything on my mind. I like talking to you. I don't like any distraction. So I have no idea what I'm going to do when we stop. I'll figure that out then. But right now there's nothing bought. Maybe I made a wrong decision about hanging out with you. But as far as I'm concerned, I looked at everything and said, no, Lily is it for now. We'll see.
Thank you. What are some of the best apps or tools to implement the getting things done system?
Anything that's a list manager that you're willing to use. It needs to be easily accessible. You don't want to have to do 4 clicks on your phone to put something into it, right? That's too much work. It needs to be instantly accessible to you and instantly available for review when you need to see it. When I go out for errands, I need to quickly look at my errands list. Say, oh yeah, here's all the stuff I need to do when I'm out and about. I need to be able to see it fast. So any kind of a list manager. I used a paper notebook for 25 years. Great tool, because you could keep lists on different pages and it's in front of you. It was physical. You could have digital too. The problem with digital is they tend to be a black hole for a lot of people. They put stuff in there, but then they don't look at it. It's lost in the digital morass of stuff on their phone or their iPad or their computer. But, you can use anything that's a list manager. I know people that use Excel. I know people that use Word documents. I know people that use all kinds of things. They're just simple lists. You just need a list. And ideally, and they're probably, I think at last count several years ago, there were over 300 apps that people had designed around the getting things done idea. And they were all just list managers, different bells and whistles on them. but basically that's all they are. We have Office 365, Microsoft, and so I just use tasks inside of Outlook. It's just a list manager. That's what I use. So I don't need anything more than that.
Thank you. For those entrepreneurs that are creative and not so used to doing linear stuff, what would you recommend for them?
Well, they're going to have to bite the bullet and sit down and be willing to make a list. The projects that they have, the actions they need to take, the things they need to talk to people about, the things they need to bring up in the next presentation to their investors. It's got to be willing to make a list. Can't get away from that.
Thank you. For those entrepreneurs that feel bad about the things that are still not done on their 1,000 things list, what would you advise them to do?
Well, look at all the options at like a Chinese menu. You ever go to a Chinese restaurant and see there's 6,000 things you could order, right? Well, you only eat one at a time, right? So you can, if you have 100 things that you could do, just pick the one that you want to do right now, and say, hey, all the others is just on hold. I mean, how many things are you not doing right now talking to me? How many things am I not doing right now talking to you? Right? So you either feel good or bad about that. That's your choice. But you can only one of my sayings is you can only feel good about what you're not doing when you know what you're not doing. And very few people have a clue about how many things they're not doing. So back to the beginning, get it out of your head, folks. Your head is a crappy office. Wasn't designed to remember, remind, prioritize, and manage relationships. It wasn't designed to do that. So you need to build an external brain, and you need to trust that look, anybody who's listening or watching this that uses a calendar is already doing that. If you don't think making a list is a good idea, throw away your calendar. Don't be intellectually dishonest, right? If you think your head can do it, let your head do it. Why have a calendar? Oh, because my head can't remember all that. Yeah, no kidding.
Thank you. Tell us where entrepreneurs can find you.
Well, gettingthingsdone.com is our website, but most of the training and seminars and coaching that we do is done by licensed licensees that we've licensed this methodology to around the world. So you can go to our website based upon what country you're in and take a look at who's locally that we've certified as a trainer or as a coach. And there's all kinds of resources for that. If they're interested in sort of snacking on me doing videos about all this material, you can go to gettingthingsdone.com/YouTube, and you'll see all kinds of, I've done 3 TEDx's. I got all kinds of like little videos about various aspects of this. If people like to sort of snack on that sort of kind of stuff. So there's lots of ways you could get to this. I'd get the book, getting things done. Come on, it's a manual about all this.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential, so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.